Hey guys, we have the fabulous Gemma Tuson on today. And some of you might know Gemma. She's been a member of the Ivy community for a long, long time now. But this is an opportunity to get to know her a little bit better. So a little bit of background. Gemma is, and she can explain this a little bit more, she's the department CEO of Source Youth Work. And she works with young people in Wilmslow High School, helping with their mental health. She attends Ivy Shaston on a regular basis, and she helps out with kids' work there, as well as serving on the youth team on Monday nights. So, Gemma, it's great to have you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So, Gemma, I've just explained a little bit about what you currently do. Let's go a little bit further back. Briefly, what was your testimony, and how did you come to know Jesus? How did you come to Ivy?
Okay, so it's a long time ago now, but I didn't grew up in a Christian home. My mum had always kind of dipped in and out of church, but when we were young, we didn't go to church as a family or anything like that. When I was 13, she started going to a church in our village, and she invited me along. She said, there's lots of young people there. They're all sort of your age. Why don't you come along? So I would go, and I wouldn't stay for long because I did horse riding on a Sunday. So I would go for part of the service, and then I would get picked up and go off to horse riding. And so I missed sort of the youth part of it because I was there for the worship, but not for the message. When I was about 15, I stopped horse riding, and I started going to church a bit more with my mum. And through doing all the youth stuff, I became a Christian. And then I got baptised when I was 16. But during that same time, I started going to college. I just left school. I was free. I was meeting lots of interesting people. As I got to sort of 17, I started going to pubs, and I had a bit of a wild few years during my teenage years. But all the time, I still went to church. I still believed, and I was still really interested to find out more, and interesting to know this God that they were talking about. But I don't think that during those times I could say that I had a really deep personal relationship with Jesus.
Okay. Yeah, I resonate with that a little bit. I mean, we all have different definitions of wild times. So now you're doing, you're doing work with youth. It seems to be a very, very strong passion, and you also have, side projects with that. You've done some work, created some material for youth. How did you get into that? How did you end up being so focused on youth work and mental health to come alongside that?
It's quite a long story, but so my degree is in fashion. I did a fashion degree. And during my during my work experience, I went to London, and I was working with a magazine, a teenage magazine called Just 17 that was around at the time.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so I did fashion design, but then in my final year I focused on fashion styling, so I did a lot of fashion photography and styling, and I really loved teenage magazines, but I also hated them at the same time. I thought that it portrayed a really bad image to young people. I thought that the content wasn't necessarily great or wholesome, and I came out of my degree wanting to set up my own magazine. Which was the first thing that I ever pioneered. I set up a magazine. I cheekily asked Andy Hawthorne if I could have an office space at the Message. They'd just opened in Sharston, and I saw that I had a look around when they had this open day and saw that they had loads of spare space. So I asked him if there was space for me there. Wow. And they gave us, myself and my friend, they gave us a desk. And it was such a privilege to be part of such an amazing organisation, or to be in their space. We weren't affiliated with them, but they were just letting us have this space, and it was incredible. We were, we were able to join their prayer days and everything that they did, and learn so much from them, and it was a really amazing time. So from then, I then started doing some freelance workshops with young people. I was doing fashion workshops within high schools, one of them in Manchester, which was branded as Golden Time for the year 7s. And I would go in once a week, and we'd do t-shirt creations, and they would then showcase them. And at the same time, other groups were doing different things. So they were doing graffiti art and dance and drama, and everybody would showcase that. And it was a really fun time. And I did that as a freelance for Engage, who were working with young people, who are still working with young people in Manchester. And then from that, I then got a bit more work through Engage, and I was working in a high school in Macclesfield, and they asked me, I was doing creative stuff with them, but they asked me would I be interested in doing some one-on-one mentoring with some of the girls that they had that were having some issues with their mental health and with self-harm and things like that. So I started doing one-on-one mentoring with them, which was really great. Really enjoyed just having that time to help them. And then as my contract was coming to an end, sorry, I missed a part. During that time, I was also writing a resource called Beloved. And my main focus really was on, so it was for Christian youth groups, but my main focus was on helping the youth worker build community within their youth group. So a lot of the time I felt like I would go into a situation and I would help a group of young people and build a relationship with them, but then I would leave them. And we'd got to a point where they were opening up and confiding in me, and then I would just disappear, and it grieved me. And I thought, like, if it's grieving me, how would it be affecting these young people as well? So Beloved came from that point. I was thinking, I want to help youth workers build relationship with their own young people, and then hopefully those relationships can go deeper and carry on. So I wrote Beloved, which we're still using now. And I met up with a friend of a friend who was setting up a project in Wilmslow, and I got in touch with him and I said, look, I've got this new resource, maybe you can use it with the young people that you're connecting with in Wilmslow. So we got together for a coffee, and he had just started this project in Wilmslow. He didn't really know what he was doing. He was just employed to connect with the young people, and he went to the high school and said to them, how can I serve you? Which I thought was incredible. He didn't go with an agenda. He didn't say, this is what I can do for you and all that. He just basically said, how can I serve you? And after a few different roles within the school, he ended up in the Wellbeing Hub, and students were being sent to him to talk to him about their mental health. And he'd been sent a few girls, and obviously for safeguarding and things like that, wasn't able to do one-to-ones with them. So I'd said to him, I've just been doing some mentoring in a high school in Macclesfield. My contract has now come to an end. I have some spare time, so if you need anybody, I'm available. And so I started working with him, and because both of us are very similar, we don't settle for just small things. We're both got like a pioneer heart. We started to create more and more things out of what we were doing. So we created a resource called Trace. That's a mentoring resource that the high school then bought for every year 7 and year 8 in their in the school. We've set up like a cafe, a drop-in cafe, where the young people come after school three times a week. And then we do two Friday night hangouts. So we're really, really busy. We've connected with loads of young people. Not only that, we have space in our cafe. We have two breakout rooms where we have free counselling, and we've partnered with some counsellors in Macclesfield called Just Drop Him. And the young people come and have free counselling in that space. And in September, we started an alternative education programme on a Thursday for the young people that can't physically go into school because of their mental health. So we have started this education programme that is hopefully a stepping stone for them to get back into school. And even though we only started in September, we had one young person who couldn't access school and hadn't accessed school for over 18 months, and he just started going back into school just before we went into lockdown. So
that's amazing. That's so inspiring, Gemma. That little seed that would have been sown many years ago, coming off the back of reading Just 17 magazine. And to think about all the lives that has been impacted doubtly and indirectly through what God has been doing through you and the relationship that you've built. Fantastic work. On this note, Gemma, with you being so close to the youth work and us going through this time now, this global pandemic, what do you think that, what could we be more aware of in relation to what the youth are going through during this time?
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult time for the young people. I think we're too quick to say that they spend too much time on social media, but they do definitely need that face-to-face contact with their peers. I mean, we've proven it with our drop-in cafe and hangout sessions that they just want to be together and they want to hang out together, and then we can't get rid of them at the end of the day. You know, they want to be hanging out with their peers. So although they do have social media and they do have FaceTime and everything else that they use to connect with their friends, they definitely need that face-to-face. So I think that it is a struggle for them at the moment. I know it's a struggle because I hear stories of young people that we work with. I think communication is massive, and it's definitely a key, and we need to just keep talking to our young people. We need to keep checking in with them. We need to be a little bit persistent in a way, but not too overbearing, because we can ask them how they are and they say they're fine, and a lot of the time they're not. So we need to find those ways to check in with them in a not threatening way, but in a caring way, to make sure that they're doing all right. Yeah,
that's really interesting answer you gave there, Gemma, that they really want the face-to-face, and I appreciate this as a generalization, but it's a starting point to go into this, that it's like when we were hanging out when we were younger, not to betray our age here, like we didn't really have, like, there were a time when mobile phones didn't exist, and so we would hang out, physically, like, do things together and chat, and now there seems to be like a stereotypical thing where, well, they're always on their phones. Even when together, they're always on their phones. So how do you balance that they want that physical contact, and then yet still technology is such a core part of their life?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, we installed free Wi-Fi in our drop-in cafe because we knew that it would be the thing that attracted them to us. And the minute they leave school, it's the first time they can use their phone all day, because they're not allowed to use it in school. And so they'll come into the cafe, they'll get their toasty or their chocolate bar and their drink, and they sit down and they get their phones out and they sit together with their phones out. And a lot of the time our volunteers some of our older volunteers are they're like, oh, isn't it funny that they just sit there on their phones, but they're still interacting with each other. They're showing each other things that they're finding on their phone, you know, the funny memes or the dances on TikTok, or some photos that are on Instagram. They're still interacting with each other whilst they're also looking at their phones. And we find a lot of time that we can, you know, they communicate really well sometimes when they're not actually looking at you. They're communicating better with something in front of them, which they do.
Yeah, I guess it's a skill that they've learned to do, right? Because
No, like my colleague Matt, I mean, I don't do this because I have no idea how to use a PlayStation or anything, and I embarrass myself if I even try. But my colleague will sit with the boys on the beanbags and talk to them whilst they're just staring at the screen. You know, they're not looking at him, but they're chatting away to him because they're busy doing something, and that's when he gets the most out of them sometimes.
That's funny. We're developing a very strong multitasking generation here. And then I want to come back to what you're doing now, and I know that you've been doing some great stuff for the NHS, Gemma. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so after a week of lockdown, I was furloughed because we were trying to do some remote youth work, and it wasn't really working out for us. So we had to be furloughed, which is okay. All our young people knew about it, so that was fine. But I'm somebody who always wants to be doing something. I can't really sit still for long. And with my fashion degree background, when I heard that the NHS was struggling for scrubs, I just thought, well, you know, I'm going to have to help. I can't just sit and hear that and not help. So a friend of mine who's also very good at sewing, I said to her, she's on furlough as well, so I said to her, hey, why don't we attempt to make a couple of pairs of scrubs for the NHS? So she was excited about it. And we decided that we would set up a Just Giving page and ask if people wanted to donate for fabrics, because a lot of people were using old bedding and bed sheets and things like that, and you know, it looks great. Some people wearing, you know, like football themed scrubs and all sorts of different things, but we wanted to go down the more classy route and buy some nice coloured fabric. And so at first we thought, oh, maybe £100 would be great, but then both of our husbands said, oh, I'll give you £50 towards it. So straight away we were like, oh, well, we need to maybe say £200. So we put a Just Giving out, and we put our limit at £200 and put it out on Facebook and Instagram. And within 24 hours, we'd raised £400.
Wow.
Which was incredible. But then at the same time, it was a bit like, oh, now we're going to have to make loads of scrubs. So we put a call out for people, you know, would anyone like to join our team? And we got 6, including us two, we've got 6 seamstresses now. The person that we sourced the fabric off gave us the fabric at cost price. So instead of £3 something a metre, we got it for £1.30. And so that equated to 220 metres of fabric, which hopefully will make in the region of 55 pairs of scrubs.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. And how many have you made so far?
As a team, we've made 10 pairs. So
wow,
it's
a lot of work. I mean, how much time does it take to make one?
I'm guessing that the more you make, the quicker it is to make them. But we only started last week because it took us a while to get the source the fabric. It took a good part of a day to make one set for me.
Wow.
With obviously stopping and starting and looking after the family and stuff. But then the next day when I started making the next pair, it was just, I knew what I was doing, so it was a lot quicker. So I'm just hoping that the more I make, the quicker I get, and I'll be whipping them up in hours.
I mean, that's still amazing, Gemma. That really is, because I know, you know, you asked for donation, you've seen the generosity of people. but I think giving the money is the easier thing. Like the time that you're putting in, that really shows the heart to help out in a time like this. So that's fantastic, like spirit and contribution. Really cool. So this going back to COVID and what we're going through. How do you feel like in your interpretation? What do you think God is doing during this time? Like how is he? Let me start that again, Ben. If you see this, just cut that question out. So, with regards to the pandemic, Gemma, how do you feel? How is your? Let me start that again. Sorry. Hard. I just want to make this question concise. Okay. Gemma, when it comes to the pandemic and what we're all experiencing right now, how has what you're going through like influenced your relationship with God during this time?
I really trust that he knows what he's doing during this time. At the start of the pandemic, I was praying and I had a vision, like I saw a picture of church buildings all across the country, and the walls were just falling down. They were coming down, and there was congregation still inside the churches, still praising and worshipping. And there was people that had been stood outside these churches for years, wondering what went on in those buildings. People that felt like they couldn't walk through those doors for many different reasons, because they didn't feel like they would be welcome. They didn't feel like they were worthy enough to go in church, that they would be accepted, that were standing outside these churches for years and years and years, and that, were just thinking, what do they do in there? What do they talk about? What is it that, why are people going in there? And all these walls were coming down, and there was no longer that barrier between the people who were wondering and the people inside. And they were stood there going, this is what you do. This is what you say in there. This is what goes on in those churches. And I felt like, yeah, that's what God's doing. He's like, we're going onto social media now, and everybody and anybody who has ever wondered what goes on inside the churches are able to have access to church and see what we've been doing and what we say and how we worship. And also, we as the church can't say who is and who isn't allowed in. And I know as a church, we don't necessarily do that. We don't have prejudice.
Prejudices, yeah.
Yeah, we don't discriminate against people, and we don't say, sorry, you can't go in. But I'm sure that there are churches where there are people who will look at people who walk in and think, what are they doing there? Why are they coming into this church? And so we can't determine who's watching these videos. We can't determine who's logging on and hearing the word of God and having those revelations, And I just think God's going to use this time massively to impact people that we have never been able to impact, that we've never been able to reach because we've had walls around our church. So yeah, I'm excited. I don't know whether that answers your question, actually.
That does. That really does. I love that picture. And because you have that prophetic gifting, right? God gives you these images. And so that's amazing. I love that. Walls breaking down, barriers from both sides, as you just described, from the inside out and the outside in. With that said then, Gemma, what do you think would be a challenge for us as Christians in this time? what could we be focusing on more on to align with God as God is doing this new thing?
I think we need to be, and this is a massive challenge for me as well, actually. So I'm not just speaking to other people, but this is a challenge to me. It's just be more transparent and be more honest and real. I've always been careful who I've shared parts of my life with, and I don't mind talking about God to these people and sharing my faith with that person because they're a safe person and I know that they're going to accept me and not judge me, but maybe not that person because I'm not really sure about how they're going to react to that and they might reject me, and that might be awkward because I have to see them every day, so I do pick and choose who I share my faith with, and I think that we're just going to have to be a lot more transparent. So sharing the faith lifts from a morning, the morning faith lifts from that Ivy are doing. You can't say, oh, I'm only going to share it with these people and not these people. You press share on Facebook and you're sharing it with everybody who you're friends with. And so that's being more transparent to everybody. That's showing them what you believe and what your faith is. And I think we need to do that. I think we've always needed to do that, but during this time, we can do it even more.
Yeah, I think you picked on something there that is, to some degree, an issue with that everyone faces, the fear of being accepted by the people in different areas of our lives, and wearing a different mask to accommodate that, versus does any of that really matter when God calls us to love and God calls us to share the gospel? And if our focus was primarily on that, then these masks don't really matter, right? It's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Great. Gemma, so what's last question here for you? Like, how do you think for yourself personally, or even wider, if you've thought about it, things will be different once we've finished this particular chapter in the history of the world, where things start opening up again? People talk about new normal, and yet nobody knows really what that is. Have you given that much thought for yourself personally, or even wider?
To be honest with you, I'm taking each day as it comes, so I'm not really thinking about the future too much because I don't know what my work's going to look like, and I'm hearing so many different things from people of when schools might be back together again, and I'm hearing June, I'm hearing January, and whether I can still do my job. So I keep myself from thinking too far in the future because I can't really worry about that because I don't know. It's all in God's hands. I'm hoping that we're all more tolerant of each other. We're all more accepting of each other. That just thinking about my street, I never really used to speak to my next door neighbours that much. I used to just say hi to them, and they're lovely, pleasant people. But I'm speaking to them daily. I found out that my next door neighbour is a textiles teacher, and she's now sewing scrubs with me. So but like I've had the time to speak to them, and I think that we're always in a rush, aren't we? And I am the worst person to stick my head down and rush past people because I don't have the time to speak to people. And I just really hope that coming out of this, we really value that. And I really hope that I value that. Just speaking to somebody at the supermarket or in the street. I mean, when I go for a walk, everybody's saying hello to each other. I don't know whether that's everybody's experiencing that, but just going for a walk and because we're seeing human beings, we're saying hello to each other. And I've never experienced that before, apart from walking in the countryside when you haven't seen a person for the last half an hour and then you bump into someone. But and it's lovely. It's lovely to have eye contact and say hello to each other. So I'm just hoping that we're all just a lot more loving and gracious and caring towards one another when we come out of this, and more tolerant and just grateful and thankful. Yeah,
it's great. Thanks, Gemma.